Well, good morning and welcome, everyone. Jim Brett here at the New England Council. And I hope that 2022 is off to a great start for all of you. We're so pleased that you could join us today for this month's edition of Inside the Corner Office. And I want to take a moment to quickly remind you of a few upcoming events the Council has planned. On March 10th, we will host an in-person breakfast with New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu at the Bedford Village Inn. And our next Inside the Corner Office virtual program will be held on March 24th with Peter Mendercall, the president of Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. And stay tuned for announcements very soon of several other in-person events later in the month with Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Richie Neal. And just a reminder that we're requiring all attendees to provide proof of vaccination to attend our in-person events in an effort to keep everyone safe and healthy. And today we're honored to welcome the president and CEO of one of the nation's top pediatric hospitals, Dr. Kevin Churchwell. Dr. Churchwell is coming up on his 1-year anniversary of his appointment as the president and CEO of Boston Children's Hospital. He previously served as the executive vice president of health affairs and chief operating officer for 8 years under former CEO Sandra Fenwick. Dr. Churchwell's very impressive resume also includes stints leading AI DuPont Children's Hospital in Wilmington, Delaware, Monroe Carroll Junior Children's Hospital, part of the Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville, Tennessee. He's a graduate of MIT, Vanderbilt Medical School, where he completed his residency. Dr. Churchwell, thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. And let us just dive in, because I know time is very limited. I understand, obviously, that you have grown up in Nashville, but what brought you to New England? And more importantly, what has kept you here?
Well, Jim, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. I arrived in Boston in the New England area, actually in 1979. I remember that because that was the second time I flew on an airplane. But I arrived here to actually start my undergraduate career at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. And so spent that time there and really had that eye-opening experience. In some respects, sort of changed my professional trajectory in terms of what I thought was what the opportunities were. But during that time, I decided to become a doctor and went back to where I grew up. I grew up in Nashville and went to med school at Vanderbilt University School of Medicine, but returned back here to do my internship residency at Boston Children's. So my first time at Boston Children's was in the mid to late 80s, and spent about 8 years here before leaving. Then I went back home and spent over 15 years at Vanderbilt as part of their healthcare system. And during that time, I went from taking care of patients to the administrative part. So by the time I left, as you'd mentioned, I became CEO of the Children's Hospital there. And then was recruited elsewhere and spent 2.5 years at the Alfred I. DuPont Hospital for Children. And then I got a call from Sandy Fenwick, who was the incoming CEO at Boston Children's, and asked to come back in the role that you described as the Chief Operating Officer and EVP of Health Affairs. My wife and I, Gloria, always loved Boston in the New England area. It's where our first child actually was born. So when we were given the opportunity to come back, we were very excited about it. So that's how I arrived back and have been back since about 2013.
Right. You began your medical career as a resident at Children's. Did you ever imagine back then that someday you may be right there in that seat running this hospital?
Oh, absolutely, Jim. That was no, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
I love being a doctor. I love taking care of patients. I love
Mhm.
taking care of patients. And I thought that was where my career was going to be. But as
Right.
you know, things change. Things
Mhm.
change.
Mhm. But what prompted your interest in pursuing a career in pediatric medicine?
Well, during your time in medical school, especially as you start your third year, things are different now, but when I was doing it, you would start looking at the clinical aspect of medicine in your third year by doing rotations. And actually, pediatrics was my first rotation in the hospital. And I found out that I very much enjoyed taking care of children. And the key part was that the children didn't mind me. They did, and that's key for a pediatrician, actually. But I also very much enjoyed the aspects of the problems that children present, the diseases they present, and the ability for us to interact and help take care of them is something that I found very rewarding and different from care of adults or in the surgery aspect. And so that really, I sort of really moved toward pediatrics from that standpoint.
Hmm. I was just fascinated to learn that you not only have one, but two brothers who are very, very successful physicians, and one of whom is your twin. Tell us more about what drove this passion for medicine in your family. I read your father was a reporter, I believe, for the Nashville Banner. I mean, I'm trying to find a root of healthcare in the family, and it's just amazing. All three brothers are in the healthcare and they're physicians. So tell us how it all began.
Right, right. Well, there are five in the family, five siblings,
Right.
and three of us went to medicine. And it was part of it was my father, who you mentioned as the reporter for the Nashville Banner, who encouraged that. I will tell you that our older brother, Andre, was very much committed early on to going into medicine. It was due to the death of a really beloved aunt who died tragically very quickly. And that very much affected him in terms of they didn't have an answer for why she deteriorated so quickly. She probably had amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, as we look back on it, but no answers at that time. And that spurred him to very much pursue medicine as a career. My twin brother, Keith, also decided early on in high school that medicine was his trajectory. Of course, I had decided that I was not going to be a doctor. You know, we had too many doctors in the family, and that's what I told my father. We had too many doctors in the family. I was going to do something else. And he was very clear with me that I was going to be a doctor. And so I went to MIT to be an engineer. That's what you go to MIT for, right? And found out over a period of time that my father was right, that my interest really was moved toward medicine as a career. What I was interested in, what I pursued was very much aligned with that. And so I changed my mind and decided to pursue medicine. And I think I probably made the right decision as I think back on it.
Did you occupy much space on that wall of accomplishments and achievements that your father had there in your living room?
Oh, you've seen that. You've seen
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Oh gosh.
No, no pressure. Yeah.
No, my father, my mom, and my dad are passed. They passed away, but they were two incredibly influential individuals in our lives. And so he was very proud of all of our achievements. And so that's where that wall created. Of course, his achievements are on that wall also too. And that you probably know that because of his work, he was a newspaper man, as you mentioned, but he was actually the first African-American to work at a daily Southern newspaper. And so he started his work in 1950. And with his work, it's recognized actually in the African-American Smithsonian that his artifacts are there.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, so he was pretty proud of that. And
Yeah, sure.
he's proud of the work that he did.
Oh, wow. As he should be, and you should be. Wow.
Absolutely.
The pandemic has obviously highlighted, and many people are now more aware of some of the inequities in our healthcare system in our country. We're certainly seeing communities of color impacted most by this pandemic. tell us more about some of the efforts underway at Children's to address these inequities that would ensure that all patients have access to the best care and also to the best healthcare outcomes.
Well, Jim, I will tell you that the work at Children's has been long lasting in terms of what we've recognized in terms of health equity, the need for diversity and inclusivity. But I will also tell you that over the past 2 years, 2+ years, that work has accelerated dramatically. Certainly with what has happened in our society, with the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and its issues with COVID, there was I think a societal upheaval regarding this, and certainly in healthcare, the need and recognition that no one was really doing enough, and that what we needed to do was really become much more intentional in this piece of work. And so at Boston Children's, that's where we've started. We started this work from that standpoint. We made it part of our goals that we work to achieve every year from a hospital or from an enterprise. We worked to really look inward about what we were doing or not doing to actually move the ball forward from a health equity standpoint and inclusivity and diversity standpoint. And we continue to do that. And that it's a piece of work that I think that will never go away. It's a piece of work that we need to continue to be very intentional about in terms of creating goals for ourselves each year and achieving those goals, metrics in terms of who we're recruiting, how we're retaining really diverse talent, how we're talking with our patients and families, how we're working with them from an equity standpoint. What are we doing to actually improve our conversation or improve our care from that standpoint? Those are the issues that we're internally really looking at to make sure that we're actually leading the effort around this piece of work. From an external standpoint, we also recognize that there was much to do, and that Boston Children's has always been a leader from the standpoint of pediatrics, a leader regionally, a leader locally, regionally, and nationally, and even internationally. And this is a piece of work that we also need to be a leader in. And so in doing that, we decided with our board of trustee leadership to create an institute for this work of health equity and inclusivity. It's called the Sandra L. Fenwick Institute, after Sandy, who is my boss, who was very committed to this piece of work and really started us on this journey. That institute is an institute that is looking at not just internally to Boston Children's, but externally in terms of what we can do and recognize and lead to move this work forward from a public policy standpoint, from an education standpoint, from a development of the workforce of diversity and inclusivity, and also importantly from a research standpoint. And what is the next evolution of research, especially in pediatrics, around health equity, inclusivity that will move the ball forward? And this is all part of the work that we're doing at Boston Children's.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the second half of that question you've answered already, but just to repeat again, in the course of your career, you have been a champion for D&I in the healthcare industry. But I'm more interested in the strategies you found successful in fostering that more diverse and inclusive workforce. And then what are the challenges when it comes to diversity in that medical community?
Well, I think the success has really been predicated on finding the right people, finding those individuals that are passionate about it, that really, we wake up every day saying, this is important and we need to do something about it. And I want to be the leader in doing that. And so my job has always been to find those leaders and to empower them, to give them the resources to move this forward. And also to create an environment where the entire hospital or the institution understands the importance of it, that it's not just a nice thing to do, but it's important for care. It's important for Boston Children's, it's important for excellence in care. Then how can we provide excellence in care if we don't understand diversity and inclusivity and health equity? You know, Jim, when you come into our lobby, you'll see the whole rainbow of families, of races and religions. And they come to us for care. And if we're not representing them and who is taking care of them, are we doing the best we possibly can? Are we really providing excellence? And so that's the challenge that I've sort of given to our folks. And they've really taken the bit. They've really seen that, yes, we see this as this opportunity. And finding the right leaders for our chief of quality, chief of health equity and inclusion, our chief of diversity, and giving them the resources and those that work with them the resources to make this happen, I think has been a success. Then you asked about the challenges, right, in terms of this. And the challenge is, how do we keep this conversation moving at the forefront? You know, it's always something else will come up, right? That's important. Something else will move it off the front page. And how do we continue to keep it at the front, not at the back burner? I like to say that, you know, everybody's interested in this, but, you know, when we create the agendas for our meetings, we have a tendency to put health equity and inclusion, if it's a 10, it's a number 10 agenda, it's number 10 on the agenda. So what does that mean? Well, if it's an hour meeting, the last 2 minutes you spend on health equity and diversity. Yeah. And so the goal is to make it number 1 or number 2 or number 3 on the agenda, so that we're always talking about it. We always give it the time that it needs to actually understand and move it forward. So that's my goal, to keep it at the forefront and keep us intentional about the work. And that's the challenge that we have.
Great. Well, another challenge is the COVID. That has really put a spotlight on mental health challenges. And for so many, the stress, the isolation of the pandemic has exacerbated the mental health challenges, to say the least. Can you talk about how the pandemic has impacted children's mental health and how Children's is working to provide mental and behavioral health services to young people?
Well, you know, with COVID, Jim, the number of children that we've had to care for within the hospital has been still relatively small, compared certainly to our adult counterparts. And so COVID has certainly affected children. They've been affected, but it has not been the driver of admissions to the hospital, the drivers of mortality or morbidity that we've seen with COVID. But I will tell you, our pandemic in the last 2 years has been around behavioral health in pediatrics. The number of children that have presented to us, that continue to present to us with these issues, has been in some respects overwhelming. And we see this not just here in our region, but nationally, that this has been an issue that we've got to handle. At Boston Children's, we've worked to provide more resources, more people, more space for the care of our children with these issues. I call them, this is part of the Band-Aid approach, that we see the problem and we try to address it immediately. But I think that we've also got to think longer term about how do we address this, not just the present and the future. And we're doing that by thinking through what is the environment that we need to develop to create the right environment for care for our children from an inpatient standpoint, care from an outpatient standpoint, care that really provides the education for the next generation of care providers, and also the research that needs to happen for care for our kids. And that's what we're doing now, to really think through, what does that campus look like? That is why we've actually worked to affiliate with Franciscan's Children's Hospital. Our goal is working with Franciscans to work with them to really create that campus. I'm not promising that that will be the solution set. I think it will be part of the solution set, working with the state, working with our community providers, working with the school systems, working with our parents. That will get us to the next level of care for our kids with behavioral and mental health issues.
I know that Children's is undergoing very significant growth with several new facilities that are in the works. Can you tell us a little more about those facilities? More importantly, the types of services they'll provide.
Right. Thank you for that question. You know, the work has been around, how do we continue to provide the right access for our kids in this region? My goal is to provide the type of access that our children can reach us with no more than 20 minutes of time, meaning that working with our colleagues, working with those like institutions that do the work, whether it's in the central part of the state, the western part of the state, the southern part of the state, that access is there. And part of that is the buildings that we're building, the bricks and mortar in terms of clinics and hospital that we're building. And so we're very excited that our next tower for our inpatient care, the Hale Family Building, is almost ready to be occupied. I think by June of this year, we'll have that available. And that'll be on our main campus. And it's for care for our children locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally, for children with really complex disease, especially from a cardiac standpoint, a heart standpoint. Our heart center will be there. And also our neonatal intensive care unit will also be in that building. And we're very excited about that opportunity. We're also creating access in our satellites outside of our main campus. We've opened a clinic building on Brookline Avenue. We call it Children's at Brookline. That really is concentrating on children with behavioral issues, neurodevelopment issues. Our kids with autism, as an example, to provide them access to expert care and also to provide an environment for the next research for our kids with those disorders. And then in our satellites, we are really developing our next evolution for that. You know that we have a significant clinic and ambulatory surgical space in Waltham. And we're looking to continue to modernize that facility as we move forward. We're also looking to modernize and develop our physician practice buildings in Weymouth on our South Shore, so there's access there. You know, we have access for our children north in Peabody as the main building. And then we're developing our next evolution for access, clinic, and ambulatory space in Needham, with all the goals so that our families have quick access to us, either by highway, either by car, or either by public transportation, with the goal that they can get to us easily and actually get home easily. You know, the hardest part of getting us on our main campus is that, I call it that left turn, Jim. You know, you've got that light, and then just getting into our park, you could take 20 minutes to get to us and another 30 minutes to park. And the whole goal is to alleviate that problem by creating this type of access in our periphery.
You know, we all know, again, that Children's is just world-class medical center, but you're also a major, and you touched on a little bit, a research facility. And because of the elected officials that we have here in New England, you're the top recipient of pediatric research and funding from NIH. But can you just talk a little more about some of the research projects that are underway at Children's right now?
Well, if you got another 2 hours, we could do that, but I'll try to be brief. Our research enterprise has just been phenomenal, but also incredibly important in terms of creating the next evolution of care for our kids. Mm-hmm. Some of the work we're doing at COVID, as you can imagine, we've identified its access or how it reacts to kids. As I mentioned, we haven't had a lot of children present with COVID, but certainly there's a disorder called multisystem inflammatory disease or syndrome that children present about 2 weeks after initially getting COVID, that we've identified and we've created a solution set in terms of treatment for. It's an inflammatory process that affects the vasculature of the body, the heart, and et cetera, that we've done great work in. We're doing great work with particular diseases, sickle cell disease being a great example of that. And then we are at the forefront of potentially curing sickle cell. And I don't say that lightly, Jim. I say that we're at the forefront of that with gene therapy. And our researchers, Dr. Vijay Sakaran, Stu Orkin, Dr. Orkin, Dr. Dave Williams, have been just the leaders in this work. We're doing the clinical trials with this work now, and have had individuals who had sickle cell throughout their life, who suffered through it, who now wake up now without it. They wake up, you know, ready to exercise. They wake up thinking about having no pain. They wake up thinking about getting a job. And that may sound like something simple, but it's profound in terms of the change that is occurring there. We have research happening in epilepsy. Dr. Ann Paduri is leading, looking at the genetic causes of epilepsy, identifying new treatments and new opportunities to turn to drug therapy. And then I'll just close like our heart program and looking at congenital heart disease and the research that's happening there, looking at the genetic causes, looking at also new ways of therapy, new treatments, new operations, new surgeries, and how we can utilize just a different view of changing the course of children with these issues. It's incredible. I invite you, Jim, at some point to come visit, and we'll give you a tour and have you have an opportunity to talk with some of these great investigators.
Mm.
I'll stop there because I can keep going, but I'll stop.
That's great. That's what makes this hospital so unique and a national jewel, not just here in New England, but a national. So we obviously know how important the investment is from NIH on that research funding. And needless to say, it's on the top of your list to continue that NIH funding. But there is some talk in Congress of another round of COVID relief funding, believe it or not. If that were to come to fruition, what would be children's top priorities to be included in such a package?
Well, I tell you, that's pretty important for us, Jim, in that the effects of COVID on our hospitals and the healthcare system have just been profound. Our need to actually really create capacity for our patients with COVID and the result of actually retracting back on what others call elective, we call time-sensitive admissions, is something that has affected our hospitals dramatically in terms of their revenue. And support of that, I would ask our leaders in the federal government, the state government, to really consider and continue to help us support from that standpoint. The other support we need is the continued support around not just what's the present in terms of what we provide in care, but the future. And that's the support from a research standpoint. You mentioned the NIH, on the support that we received from the NIH. And I will tell you, it's been the difference. It's been the difference in terms of the future of our children, the future that we can provide for them, the future that they potentially will see in terms of being able to provide support for the research that needs to happen. The basic science research, the translational research, the research that happens in clinical trials that the NIH supports. This is research that others won't, it's hard to find support for. But the ability for those dollars to come to us has made a huge difference. And it is my hope and it's my desire that that continues as we move forward. I also just want to mention that the need for support in behavioral health is going to be just what we see as the next evolution in terms of care. And that support, I believe, is going to make the true difference in terms of the research support, the support for care in behavioral health that can be provided is something that is going to make the true difference for what we can do for our children.
Can I ask you a softball question? Any thoughts on the state's decision to lift a mask mandate for schools? Any concern about how that might impact the spread of COVID?
So Jim, throughout this pandemic, I think the state has done just fabulous work working with us. So we have worked in concert in terms of the healthcare leaders and the state leaders, the Governor Baker, Secretary Sutter, in making decisions, in making and the key part of that is that we looked at the data. And the data has really driven our decision-making. And so as we move forward, that's what we're going to do. And that's what I expect. As things loosen up, as we continue to allow us to come back to a different type of normalcy, the data will drive what we need to do in terms of mandates, masking, and et cetera. So I will tell you, stay tuned. Stay tuned for that decision-making. I expect that we will continue to have conversations.
Yeah. Just one other question. What advice would you give a young person interested in pursuing a career in pediatric medicine?
Also, I'm biased about that advice, but I would tell that individual there's nothing better. There's nothing that will be more fulfilling for you personally and professionally to be part of and be positive, the positive part of a child's life. To help provide and help support a child's health is something that has made a true difference in my life. You know, we have 4 kids,
Mhm.
and I tell them, always pick something in your life as your job. It's not a job, it's a profession. That when you wake up every morning, you're excited to wake up and you just can't wait to get to work. And that's been something that I've just been lucky to choose in pediatrics. And I wake up every morning excited for the day because I know that I'm going to be part of something positive, something that is going to make a difference. And that's what I tell those that come to me. That's where the opportunity is.
And also to remember what your father said, you know, go back and give back.
Absolutely.
I-
Yes.
I love that expression because it's just tells you, don't forget where you came from. You know, it's very meaningful. Well, Doctor, you've been great in giving your time. I know you have a busy day. I just want to say thank you. Not only thank you for joining us, but more importantly, thank you and your entire team at Children's Hospital for the incredible work that they do each and every day, not only to save, but also improve the lives of our region's children. We cannot say thank you enough. So thank you for joining us this morning, though, Doctor. And to all the people who, and we had a great attendance today. To all of them, I thank you for joining us on the program. Be sure to join us next month, for our guest will be the president of Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. But in the meantime, I wish all of you continued good health and hope to see you in person very, very soon. So, Doctor, again, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. It's a
Okay.
pleasure.
Okay, thank you.